Alright, what's up YouTube? This is your boy Alex, and today's YouTube video is going to be Backstreet Boys versus Nsync. Yeah, I gotta talk about these two boy bands of the 1990s and the early 2000s. Alright, so let's get to it. See, Backstreet Boys started their career in 1995, in the mid 1990s, and they did shows like Talent Show, Star Search, and Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. And there they got signed by the same people who discovered Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, and they got signed when they put out their first album. And then their hit single, Dun Dun Dun, everybody, Backstreet Boys back on, dun 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 dun. Everybody, rock your body. Everybody, dance on Backstreet Boys. Dun, 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 dun. And this boy band was like the new thing at the time. You know, there was New Kids on the Block, but New Kids on the Block was like in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and everybody remembered New Kids on the Block. But these guys popped out of nowhere. And you see there was two guys in the music group. I mean, it was a total of 5 guys, and then later it went from 5 guys to like 6 guys. You know, Aaron Carter was the little baby brother who was too young. He couldn't be on the first album, on the second album, but he popped up their third album. They did their first album, and their first album overnight went from platinum to double platinum. They went from selling 100,000 copies to 250,000 copies, and they were everywhere. These guys was in movies, television shows, billboards, commercials. These guys were going up to high schools and colleges and performing in front of everyone. And they did what they call back-to-back albums. So they did 2 albums 2 years in a row. And then right in the midst of them doing their third album, you know, Aaron Carter felt that he didn't want to be a part of the group no more. So he decided to do what any young artist at the time would do. He would try to get a solo album. So they, right in the middle of them doing 3 albums, here he is trying to do his solo album. And they were trying to, you know, they had money disputes, you know, alcohol, drugs, you know, sex, rock and roll, that type of thing. And Aaron Carter done his solo album while the group was trying to do album number 4. And this was like 1998, 1999 by this time period. In that same time period, there was another group that was on the rise, Nsync. You know, they too were on talent shows, Star Search, but it was the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse that started the legend of Nsync. You know, they was there with Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and a number of other great talents. And that's where they got their start. And then, you know, they came around 97, 98 with their first album. And just like in 1994, when I went to the back seat to the front seat of the car and tried to what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to change the song because I got tired of West Coast, East Coast rap music. And I changed it, and all of a sudden I heard this song. Bye bye, tell me what you wanna do, baby, and you know it's true. Bye bye, bye bye, bye. And my mom looked at me like, boy, who told you to change the radio? And I said I got tired of that West Coast, East Coast music. And my mom said it's my radio because my mom had booby trapped the radio to, if you change the channel, the sound of the radio will go up. And she ran out of routes and found out I had changed the song, and I got exposed to Nsync. You know, it was a different genre of music. And they had went double platinum to triple platinum like that overnight. And then they popped out back-to-back albums. And 2 years in a row, they had 2 albums. Then they had 3 albums. And then in this situation, you know, Justin Timberlake was the youngest star at the time. and they were upset with him because he had a romance with Britney Spears. He went to New York City one day and he met an executive producer named Timberlake and talked him and convinced him into having his own solo album. You know, they had did 3 albums. They were working on album number 4, and he did a deal that was worth millions of dollars. And by the time he turned, 21, 22 years old, he was kind of, I want to be my own superstar. So he put out his solo album. And then around the same time, Backstreet Boys had did 4 albums, and they ended up, having to fall out with Aaron Carter. Aaron Carter wanted his album. And at this time, Aaron Carter had put out his second album. He had already done his first album, which was somewhat of a success. He was getting ready to put out album number 2. And by the time we got to 2002, it was like a face-off. When we was in high school, we used to always talk about who's better, Backstreet Boys or Nsync. My homeboy was trying to mac to this white girl, and this white girl like, why you trying to start some shit? And I was like, he just asked you a question, who's better, Backstreet Boys or Nsync? Both of them are good at making love songs. Both are good at dancing. But when Nsync came in, they did something that was unheard of. They would take a love break song, a song where you are heartbroken because you broke up with your girlfriend, or your girlfriend broke up with you, or you got rejected by this fine looking girl, and while they're explaining heartbreak, they're talking about getting revenge at the same time. You're like, oh shit, can anybody, is that okay to talk about on the radio? Can you do that on the radio? Is that allowed to do in the music video? And then of course the next song, It's Gonna Be Me. And the song start off with girls going into the toy store, and you see 5 guys and you see their toys, and the first toy that comes to life is Justin Timberlake. And you're shaking your head like, okay, we got something interesting here. Next thing I know is we see that he becomes a superstar. All of a sudden he breaks away from them. He's doing songs with Usher. He's doing songs with Genuine. He's in there doing songs with Snoop Dogg. He crosses over from pop music to pop rock to R&B and hip hop, and he crosses over. Now, both groups have had their opportunities to do a collaboration where, they would have Justin Timberlake come do a song with Backstreet Boys. Backstreet Boys would get an artist, and they would do a song with Nsync, and then both groups end up doing a song together in the 2000s. And then they both headlined Super Bowls. Oh yeah, they've headlined Super Bowls, World Series, Soccer World Cups. They've been in movies, television shows, TV commercials, billboards. They have performed in front of high schools, colleges. They've even went as far as to even go the extra mile. They were action figures. Like when I was a kid, it used to be Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, Transformers, wrestling action figures in the toy stores, Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and the X-Men action figures. But we saw some Backstreet Boy action figures. We saw some Nsync action figures. And those toys sold out in one day. Most toys, it takes a week or a month to sell out. These sold out in one day. Both have had action figures. Both have had comic books. And these guys were good. Both, they took the idea of singing and dancing on stage to the next level. And you see, if it weren't for Backstreet Boys, if it weren't for Nsync, if we go into a time machine and we fast forward 10 years later, it wouldn't be no One Direction. There would be no Radioactive Welcome to the New Age. There would be no Maroon 5. There would be no Justin Bieber if it was not for Backstreet Boys and Nsync. These guys came in the 1990s, took over the late 1990s, came into the 2000s. They kicked ass, they took names, But by the time Backstreet Boys had done album number 4 and Nsync creeped in there, they had money problems. Managers taking money. Talents don't want to come to the studios and do their songs. Aaron Carter wanted to be the star of Backstreet Boys. And they already had 2 guys that were lead singers that were the stars of Backstreet Boys. See, Aaron Carter was the little brother. And I remember when I was a kid, they made a magazine called Who's Gonna Be the Future Breakout Star? Aaron Carter or Justin Timberlake? And you could say that Justin Timberlake ended up becoming the superstar because he had done 4 albums with the group. And then he did his solo album. And by the time we got to 2007, 2008, it became apparent that whenever Backstreet Boys did a reunion 10 years later, their first reunion, everybody remembers their first song. Everybody, Backstreet Boys on it. Dun, 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 dun. But when they did their second reunion, some people was like, okay. When they did their third reunion, not too many people really knew who Backstreet Boys was. But anytime Nsync does that song, Bye Bye, when they do their reunion, people go crazy when they see Nsync. So both groups have had 3 reunions. Now, if I had to go with a boy band, if I ever wanted to learn how to sing, if I ever wanted to learn how to dance, I would choose by a slight edge, by a slight margin, by a slight edge, Nsync over Backstreet Boys. I'll tell you why. Backstreet Boys, when it was all said and done, they put out 5 albums in 10 years. In 10 years, they put out 5 albums. Album number 6 was the Backstreet Boys' Greatest of All Times album. So if you want to, you could say 6 albums in 10 years. They've had 3 reunions in 10 years. But every time Backstreet Boys does a reunion, people forget about them less and less and less. And they end up being just like New Kids on the Block, irrelevant. Like you're a thing of the past. Now, Nsync has managed to survive for 10 years of a decade. They managed to survive. Even though the sound of music for both groups changed 5 times, they managed to survive the music period. Now, Aaron Carter put out 2 albums with the 4 albums that he had with Backstreet Boys, but Aaron Carter's second album just was not as good as his first album. And Justin Timberlake won out because he did 5 albums with Nsync. I almost said Backstreet Boys, my bad. He did 4 to 5 albums with Nsync. And as a solo artist, he put out 5 albums. And is currently working on album number 6 or number 7. So we could say, honestly, Justin Timberlake has won out. 5 albums with Nsync and 6 to 7 albums as a solo artist. And then to go to a Super Bowl and have that tragedy where he did with Janet Jackson that becomes the stuff of legend. And then to bounce back from that and hook up with 50 Cent, do songs with Usher, P. Diddy, Snoop Dogg. Justin Timberlake is just, you look at him in the movies and the TV shows, he gets better and better and better. Aaron Carter, on the other hand, just, he tried to put out a 3rd album. I mean, there was an attempt to make a comeback around 2004, 2005, early 2007. There was an attempt to make a comeback. Aaron Carter came back with a 3rd album. But again, his 3rd album was nowhere near as good as his first album. So Aaron Carter, he put out 3 solo albums and appeared on 4 to 5 albums with Backstreet Boys. Where in Justin Timberlake's case, it's 4 to 5 albums with Nsync, but 6 to 7 albums as a solo artist. And then has appeared in movies, television shows, commercials, TV talk shows, video games. Justin Timberlake just keeps crossing over and keeps getting better and better and better. He turned out to be the breakout superstar that we all know him to be. why Aaron Carter is one of those guys that when you look at him, you go, there was promise, there was a lot of potential, but we don't know what the hell happened to it. Some argue drugs, women, alcohol, a combination of the three. He never was quite the same 10 years later. Why Justin Timberlake just kept going up and up and just kept getting better and better and better. So by a slight margin, I'm going to say it's Nsync over Backstreet Boys. And to tell you the truth, it should be Backstreet Boys and Nsync, because if it weren't for them two, there would be no Maroon 5. There would be no One Direction. There would be no Justin Bieber. There would be no Radioactive Welcome to the New Age. All the groups we have 10 years later is a result of Backstreet Boys, Nsync, and let's not forget 98 Degrees. They were also a boy band too. So let's not forget that Aaron Carter was the little brother of Nick Carter. So, and even Nick Carter himself tried to spawn off 3 albums and separate himself from the group. And both of them thought they could take on Justin Timberlake and Who's the Best Breakout Superstar. And again, he managed to beat both those guys and being the breakout superstar to leave the group. And then 10 years later, they come back and they make a reunion. Like with Joe, who's a part of Nsync, he's a celebrity chef. You go on the Chef channel, he now cooks food. But when they do a Nsync reunion, he comes back to the group as if he never left. So next time on my video is going to be 2 female artists. Until next time, peace.